The opinions shared by our host and guests are their own and don't necessarily reflect the views of the Organization of American States or its donors. Thank you for tuning in.
Las opiniones expresadas por nuestros presentadores e invitados son propias y no necesariamente reflejan las ideas de la Organización de los Estados Americanos ni de sus donantes. Gracias por acompañarnos.
Welcome to the new episode of La Zona de Zone podcast, a podcast led by the Organization of American States Office in the Adjacency Zone between Belize and Guatemala, funded by the government of Spain. We're exploring a topic that grasps the roots of identity and survival. We're talking about ancestral medicine and community health. I'm Gwendolyn and I'm your host today, and I have a friend here with me. Welcome.
Hi, good day. How are you? My name is Vilma Santos. I'm from San Jose, Socots. In this episode, we will explore ancestral medicine and community health, a vital topic in rural areas where the distance from formal medical service means traditional knowledge often remains the first line of care. In many indigenous communities of the Adjacency Zone, traditional healing practices are not just cultural expressions, they are tools of resilience.
Yes, they are tools of resilience. They blend natural wisdom, spiritual connection, and intergenerational knowledge to promote holistic well-being. When we look at the practice of ancestral medicine, we must look at various communities present in our region, of course, and every community has their own methods of healing, their own remedies, and they are also predisposed to specific ailments. These communities have their own individual methods of healing. We are also able to look at the similarities that they share, and we're able to see how they have blended over time, adopting knowledge and practices from other communities. And now, in this day and age of information, we have access to more of these practices through the internet. And we're able to access plants and animals and, of course, knowledge from other regions across the world. And this is something we have to keep in mind as we go along learning about ancestral medicine.
Let's take, for example, Don Eligio Panti, a beloved Maya healer whose work helped form the foundation of Ixchel Tropical Resort Foundation. And in Guatemala, Doña Petrona, a mom healer from Huehuetenango, is also known for using more than 200 native plants. One of the most widely used plants, chaya. It is packed with nutrients and also deeply symbolic. It's said to be a gift from the goddess Ixchel.
Since you just mentioned the goddess Ixchel, I'll let you know that the goddess of Ixchel is actually the goddess of medicine and fertility in Mayan belief. But Maya healing is much more than just plants. It's a holistic system that blends body, mind, and spirit. Maya medicine was practiced by specially trained individuals known as amen, or shamans. There's many terms for the people that practice traditional medicine. In fact, the Maya had several terms for different practitioners. They had the men and shmen, which is women, men for men, and then shmen for women, and those are, it translates directly to he who knows medicine, or she who knows medicine. The Amen were known specifically to treat ailments that are related to the spirit or to any misbehavior that has angered spirits. There is also the Ashkum, which is the herbalist or the plant healer or the plant doctor, as they knew. There was also the Kashbak, which is their common chiropractor, of course. Chiropractor is what we call it now, but they call him a bone setter, the kashbak. There's many other terms for different types of practitioners, but let's not get into that now. These healers, they received extensive education and were considered intermediaries between the physical and the spiritual worlds. They believed that health was the result of living according to the laws of nature and society, and illness was a result of transgressing those laws. Illness was often seen as the captivity of the soul by supernatural beings, angered by some perceived misbehavior.
We could say that in ancient Mayan society, health was perceived as balance and the illness as imbalance. This concept was reflected on their medical practices, which included the use of herbal remedies, hallucinogens, and the application of hot and cold concepts.
While the Maya also saw the use of applying hot and cold concepts, balancing temperature in their rituals and remedies and healing practices, they also applied the associations of color to plants and to determine their uses. Red plants were often used in blood-related issues, and blue were associated with nervous system conditions. And in that category, many hallucinogenic plants and substances have a blue hue when they're bruised or when they are mixed with another substance. The yellow also was used for liver and spleen diseases, and white was avoided because it usually symbolized death or poison. They also incorporated the use of cardinal directions, and they also had their colors. So red was associated with the east, and yellow with the south, and white with the north, and black with the west. But that's a whole other concept. Temperature in Mayan healing is applying the concept of the opposite for balance. Hot and cold properties of a remedy were as important as the color. The cold disorder, for example, could be constipation. It was treated with hot and spicy foods. And if you have a hot disorder, for example, like fever, it would be treated with a cold plant.
I had no idea that the Mayan applied color to their different types of remedies.
Yes, and these herbal remedies, they were administered in various different forms. They were ingested, smoked, snorted, rubbed on the skin. They were even used as enemas for forced rapid absorption into the bloodstream, of course. Additionally, the use of sweat baths are similar to our modern saunas, were commonly used to alleviate conditions such as dysmenorrhea, menopause, premenstrual tension, and infertility. The Mayan sweat bath, the word for the sweat bath is a tu. And in the Mexican region, they also use the word temazcal. That is more Aztec. These sweat baths were used. These sweat baths were embedded deeply into daily life, into the culture. They were ritualistic, and the practice was related, of course, to the goddess Ixchel. The way that they were made was in a dome shape, and then they had a small door, and you would go inside, and you would go into the sweat bath. They were so embedded into the daily life that the structure of the tu was found in public places. If you go to a Mayan site such as Cajalpech, you're going to be able to find a tu. And that tu is placed in the public area of the site, not the private area or the royal area where the nobles used to live. It is in the public area, meaning that there was access for everyone. And the way that they used to use this tu is that after childbirth, a mother would normally go with her baby, with her newborn child, and go into the tu and detox herself. Because when you go into a sweat bath, your pores open up and you release a lot of toxins. You're releasing all these toxins, and then you're also absorbing the steam from the mixture that was made. They have hot stones, and they throw this water, this tea that was made from different herbs, onto these stones to release the steam. And so you release the steam, and you open your pores, and then you'll ingest that through your skin, basically. So after childbirth, a mom would go with her newborn baby into the tu. You'd go into the tu, and there's often lots of debris left back inside your womb after you give birth, right? And so this was a common practice so that the mother could finish passing all of the unnecessary waste that she now has after the baby is born. She no longer needs that, because the baby is not going to be consuming that anymore. And it's important to get that out of the mother's system. Apart from that, players, such as the Pocatoc players, the common ball game that they have with the Mayas, they would go into the tuh also as a ritual before the game and also after the game. So it wasn't something that was uncommon. It was so common and public. It was a public ritual, and we might be able to speculate that they would do it together as well. Of course, this is just evidence that we see based on archaeological structure and word of mouth and practices that have been passed down through generations. But we can see that the Mayas believe that detoxification was very important to their healing practices.
It was so amazing to learn a lot of things that the Mayas were able to pass through generations. And actually, in the luxury resorts now, people pay a lot of money just to experience what the Mayans discovered for the saunas and the hot and cold baths. I also heard that the surgical skills were also evident among the Mayas.
Yes, they were known to suture wounds with human hair, and they would set fractures and even perform dental work, which was pretty advanced for their time. They even made prosthetics and filed their teeth into various shapes, often inserting decorative stones such as jade, turquoise, or hematite. And which is, now we can see this practice in like grills, like when we have the diamond grills, well, they used to use jade and turquoise. They were rocking grills back in the day. These dental alterations are known to have had more of a political significance and a social significance rather than medicinal or spiritual, but we're not entirely sure. It isn't entirely ruled out of the question that they would have some spiritual significance, especially since the Maya had an affinity for precious stones and believed that there were spiritual significance in the stones themselves. In fact, in the books of Dr. Rosita Arvigo regarding Eligio Panti and his apprenticeship, precious stones play an important role in the lives of healers and their apprentices. But let's continue talking about plants.
Some of the most commonly plants used in the adjacency zone is the allspice, the pimienta gorda. It is most commonly used for the toothaches. The aloe vera is mostly used for burns or skin issues or internal cleansing. The peppermint is used for the respiratory relief or fever. And the chaya is used for energy, blood sugar, and the woman's health. Can you share any past experiences on how it is usually prepared?
Sure, of course. So the allspice, if you use it for a toothache, you would take the leaf and you would chew it. And it makes your tongue go numb and it numbs the area. So naturally it would numb the pain there. For colds, you would prepare it into a tea, and you would most commonly include a little bit of peppermint, like you mentioned. It's for relief and for fever. If you have congestion, peppermint tea will help you decongest your sinuses. Aloe vera is usually, it's a long leaf, so you slice it, you kind of peel it, and it has like a goo inside, and you apply that directly onto the skin to alleviate the pain. But if you drink it, if you eat it, it also helps clean your digestive system. So you would eat it. You would eat the aloe vera for the internal cleansing. The chaya, we often see that used for common dishes for food. People put it in their bollos. Some people cook it with their eggs in the morning. It's a common dish. It's common to go around and show up at somebody's house and they're eating eggs with chaya, right? And some corn tortillas. So it's included into the diet. And I have another one that I want to mention. I wanted to mention the ishkanan. It is a natural antibiotic, and it's what the Mayas would consider a red plant. So they applied the use of it into treating fevers, treating infections, any sort of thing that had to do with the blood. They would also use it for cleansing, and you would also drink it as a tea.
Now that you mentioned the ishkanan, I remember in my childhood, my mom used to give the ishkanan even to the dogs when they were sick. And the chaya we used to fry it with eggs, and it was so nice.
It's worth mentioning that you should always wash plants before you use them, and you should start with small doses and never over harvest them. Only take about 30% of the plant so that it can grow back. it was also common practice for healers to ask permission to harvest the plant, because they believed in the embodiment of spirits and in nature. So whenever you would go and harvest a plant, you would ask permission from the plant to use its healing properties. And so that is one of the things that you would learn if you were to begin learning Mayan healing practices when it comes to plants. And you always thank the plants for their generosity, for lending you their properties.
The healers in southern Belize often prepares teas, poultices, and baths with spiritual rituals before harvesting, prayers, or copal incense.
Yes, you're absolutely right. There is deep respect in this process. In the Garifuna communities, for instance, healing is deeply intertwined with spirituality and ancestral knowledge as well. Home remedies are often prepared using locally sourced plants, and the process is accompanied by rituals to honor the spirits and their ancestors. One notable Garifuna remedy is the gifite, a traditional herbal concoction believed to have healing and potency properties. It's made by infusing rum with various roots and herbs such as garlic, allspice, and jicaco negro, a black nut-bearing tree root known for calming the nervous system.
Additionally, Garifuna healers often perform the Dugu ceremony, a ritual feast held to appease the Gudiba, an ancestral spirit, when they often believe to be angry, often manifesting as illness. This ceremony involves offering, music, dancing, and can even last from 2 to 4 days.
I've been reading a little bit about the Garifuna healers and their practices, and it is a whole other world. And if there is anyone that would be able to come on here on La Zona, the Zone podcast and talk a little bit more about that, especially how they incorporate music and dance into their healing practices, that would be a great episode. The Dugu is a ceremony that could last up to 3 days. And the way that it begins is that there's usually a disturbance. And like the Mayas, they believe that illnesses come from imbalances, usually spiritual imbalances, and they manifest into the physical world. So if there is an imbalance in the spiritual world, then suddenly someone would begin to get sick or something would begin to happen. And then they go and they consult their head healer, which is the buye. And so they go to the buye, and the buye organizes the Dugu ceremony, where they get together and have a feast, and they bring offerings, usually food, and they also perform ritual dances and songs to appease the Gubida, the ancestral spirits. So the Gubida, they are deceased members of the family, right? Or across generations. The Garifuna believe in a cyclic universe and a cyclic existence. So they don't disappear when they die, right? And a person who might die, or maybe a grandfather or a grandmother, may become a Gubida after they die, and they become the ancestral spirits that are appeased, right? Maybe somebody died and they didn't resolve something in their life, and now they are pleading their members of the family that are alive to help fulfill that, whatever it is that they left undone, or whatever it is that they felt was not resolved at the time. So that's a little bit of what the Dugu is. I don't know a lot, but I think I read a little bit about that. So it'd be an interesting episode to bring up one of these days. And that makes a great break for our second segment, which is respect, rituals, and recovery.
Now let's talk about the spiritual side of healing.
We had an episode with the Belize Maya Forest Trust, and we spoke a little bit about the Cara Blanca pools. And these pools were sacred to the Maya, and it was the place where they used to present some of their offerings.
Now that you are mentioning where they present their offerings, what about the caves? They were also sacred ritual places.
Caves are actually sacred places for the Maya because they're believed to be the entrances to the underworld Xibalba. So this is an area where they would be able to communicate with the spiritual dimension. And we can even see several caves that exist in Belize, for example, the Aktun Tunich Mukna, right? That is the ATM cave, and inside you can even find human sacrifices that were offered here. Yes, so the Mayans did regard caves as sacred places, mostly because the caves were believed to be the entrances of Shibaba. There's a particular cave here in Belize. It's called the ATM, right? Aktun Tunich Muknal. And inside this cave, you can find what the relic we call the Crystal Maiden. And it is the body of a female who was offered in sacrifice that is now, over time, has become crystallized. And you can see tiny little crystals forming on the skeleton itself. And there's many other caves, and you can find such things. You will find clay pots, urns that contained something, probably some kind of offering that they presented. And you'll find lots of these inside the caves as evidence that the Maya were actually performing rituals in these spaces.
And now that you're mentioning these sacred places and the caves, we could encourage you to visit them and to be very respectful to them and to keep in mind their history.
There is also the sacred cave systems located in Alta Verapaz. There's an extensive system that's connected through the Calendaria River, and it's considered, it's considered to be a sacred site, but it's also described in the Popol Vuh as an entrance to the underworld, as I mentioned. Visitors can take tubing tours along the underground river, and Mayan pottery can be found within the caves.
So how do these rituals express respect for nature, the healer, or even the person who is being treated?
Well, beyond their spiritual importance, traditional healers are also custodians of scientific and technical knowledge. They have detailed understanding of the local ecosystems, plant properties, and preparation methods. This is knowledge that has been accumulated over generations and verified through observation and practice. That is one of the ways that we show respect for nature, because not only do they have to recognize the plants and learn about them, they also have to understand the ecosystems that these plants and these species survive in, so that they can be able to continue the use of these plants for generations, right?
So in a way, the healer is the bridge between the ancestral knowledge and the practical science.
Yes, exactly. In fact, modern pharmaceutical studies confirm that plants used in ancestral medicine contain active compounds with measurable medicinal effects. For instance, the Maya healer Don Eligio Panti used over 300 plants in Belize, included in treatments for inflammation, malaria, diabetes, practices now studied in scientific research. Similarly, Garifuna herbalists' knowledge of roots, barks, and leaves for anti-inflammatory, antimicrobial, and calming effects has been documented, and is considered in community health initiatives.
And it's not just about plants, right? Traditional healers also hold knowledge about rituals, purification methods, and energy work, which can complement physical treatments.
And this is really the work of many generations. So whenever you come across a book, a podcast, or even some writing about anything that has to do with traditional healing, it's very important to support this work, because these practices have been passed down for generations, vetted by many different people. And eventually, if we weren't able to preserve this knowledge, it would have been lost. So we can support many people who are writing books, they're studying, they're selling their remedies, they're speaking about it, talking about it on social media. This is how they make a living, and they're making a living off of these ancestral practices that we are discovering today as being very useful for our society. We need to point out that a lot of our practitioners of traditional healing are not educated by traditional schools, and thus are unable to be recognized by the states. There are people that are very well trained in healing practices, for example, midwives, but some cannot be recognized by the state because they cannot read or write.
I have aunts that have this particular situation. They're well-trained midwives, but they cannot read or write, so they were unable to take the midwife test so that they could practice. This stunted them from making a living because it was now almost mandatory for birthing mothers to go to a hospital. So the integration is still a very important thing to discuss when we're looking at working with modern medicine.
There is also growing recognition from government, health institutions, and academia that traditional medicine isn't just folklore. It holds knowledge that complement formal medicine. Several conferences and collaborations are good examples of this.
For example, in Belize, they hosted the second International Conference on Traditional and Complementary Medicine in Santa Elena, Cayo, in September of 2024. The theme was Traditional Healers, Keepers of Scientific and Technical Knowledge with a National and Regional Network. It brought together traditional healers, complementary medicine practitioners, and medical doctors to share experiences, challenges, and methods of integrating ancestral healing with the formal health sector from across the regions.
One outcome was the unveiling of a commemoratory plaque to recognize Belizean traditional healers, acknowledging their role as knowledge holders. Also during the conference, participants visited the Belize Botanical Garden Medicinal Plant Trail, which conserves many of plants used in ancestral healing practices.
In addition, Belize's Ministry of Health has in past years partnered with traditional healers to document medicinal plants and to explore how those plants might be used more broadly in public health. These partnerships aim to record knowledge before it disappears, and also to test safety, dosage, and potential side effects.
In Guatemala, likewise, there are clinics and health programs that have begun inviting midwives and spiritual healers into dialogues.
Other regional events mirror this trend. For instance, the World Health Organization recently held a regional consultation on research prioritization in traditional, complementary, and integrative medicines.
These events are helping in several ways. They open spaces for healers to share techniques, plant knowledge, rituals with scientists and policymakers. They help build frameworks for ethical research, standardization, and possible regulation, so that when traditional remedies are suggested or shared, there is some verification of safety. They promote cultural respect and that the idea of healing isn't only biological but also social, spiritual, and ecological.
Still, challenges remain: intellectual property rights, quality control of herbal medicines, ensuring healers are reimbursed or acknowledged, and ensuring young people learn this knowledge before the elders pass away.
And now we're stepping outside of the studio to connect with someone right here in the Adjacency Zone who's making an impact. Let's join Neri Marquez from Herbal Center as he shares his story, his experience, and how his business is transforming the community.
Soy Neri Márquez, soy naturópata, se puede decir terapeuta, ¿no? Trabajamos lo que son las plantas medicinales. Terapeuta quiere decir, o naturópata quiere decir un profesional de la salud que se dedique a equilibrar, recomendar plantas, ver, también tomar en cuenta la alimentación natural, la suplementación de minerales también entra ahí, las vitaminas. También se toma en cuenta las tres esferas del ser humano: lo físico, lo emocional y lo psicológico, ¿va? Primeramente hay que hacer una consulta formal, una evaluación, ¿va? Y tener un diagnóstico. Ajá. A base de un diagnóstico, pues ya se le puede poner la planta correcta. Si uno considera que puede ayudar con una planta, pues uno se compromete. Ahora, si el problema es grave, pues ya hay que transferirlo a un profesional de la salud, ¿eh? Porque también las plantas tienen su cierto límite, ¿va? Hasta dónde pueden llegar, ¿no? Pero como preventivas, para problemas no crónicos, funcionan muy bien, ¿no? Solo que hay que usarlas en dosis formal, la cantidad correcta, y también hay que tomarla por, se puede decir, a largo plazo. Estamos hablando de un tratamiento formal de unos 3 meses, ¿va? Para que funcione bien. Porque un problema complicado no lo vamos a solucionar en 8 días, ¿va? Y tampoco en una semana, ¿no? Mayormente si es crónico, ¿va? Pues las plantas son muy buenas. Hay plantas que funcionan muy bien para subir el sistema inmunológico, para las defensas, digestivas, antiinflamatorias. Hay una gran cantidad de plantas que son antiinflamatorias y digestivas, la mayor parte, ¿no? Ajá. Se pueden usar con confianza. Hay plantas de baja potencia que no tienen mayores contraindicaciones, ¿va? Y hay de mediana potencia y de alta potencia. Entonces ahí hay que conocer un poco las plantas, ¿va? Primeramente hay que educarlos con la alimentación. Tienen que comenzar con ellos mismos, ¿no? Una buena alimentación saludable. Y fuera importante que hubiera alguien para que los eduque con las plantas, que no se sigan destruyendo la naturaleza. Sí. Porque ese ha sido uno de los factores principales que ha acabado con la naturaleza, ¿va? Ajá. El botar las montañas, ¿no? De ahí comenzó el daño a las plantas, ¿no? Una planta simplemente puede ser de gran beneficio, lo puede sacar de un gran apuro, y a lo mejor la tiene en el patio y no la conoce, ¿no? Entonces, lo importante es que la persona, educarlo y enseñarle a que respete las plantas, ¿no?
And that was a great perspective from someone in the community who is working within the topic of ancestral and herbal medicine. And now let's continue our conversation here in the studio.
But with more conferences and more collaborations and more recognitions, the gap between modern medicine and traditional healers is being narrowed. And that can lead to more inclusive, cultural informed health systems that can respect ancestral medicines as a vital resource.
And since we just mentioned that it's important for the young people to learn these traditions before the elders pass, in this segment we'll talk about protecting and promoting ancestral health knowledge. With fewer young people speaking Mayan language, we risk losing a whole world of knowledge. In places like Punta Gorda, Belize, and Chisec, Alta Verapaz, Guatemala, elders are working with youth and NGOs to document plant knowledge, oral histories, and healing songs. Meanwhile, efforts are underway to integrate ancestral knowledge into school curricula, radio programs, and community workshops across the Adjacency Zone, just like we're doing today.
Why is it important to share this knowledge with younger generations?
Well, because ancestral medicine is more than just treatment. It's a way of seeing the world, where health is tied to balance with nature, respect for elders, and spiritual connection. If we lose access to this worldview, we're losing a vital part of our cultural identity. In essence, we're forgetting who we are. And this ancestral medicine, it's not just a treatment like we mentioned, it's a legacy of thought, of understanding.
In your experience, what is the best way to share this knowledge with the younger generation?
One way is through community-led documentation projects, such as this one, where elders teach directly while youth record recipes, stories, and rituals in both Mayan and Spanish or English languages. Another is to apprentice with respected healers, pairing young people with healers to learn directly through practice. You can even do this at home by speaking to your grandparents, speaking to your local elders, write down their stories, and if you have permission, record them.
And what role can the national health and the education system play in recognizing and valuing this knowledge?
A big role. Some strategies include policy recognition, formally recognizing traditional healers as part of the national health system, as seen in countries like Bolivia and Mexico. Also, collaboration frameworks, creating referral systems where clinics work with healers, especially in rural areas where access to doctors is limited.
These strategies make it clear. Preserving ancestral medicine is not just about the past, it is ensuring more healthier and more cultural grounded futures.
Exactly. By protecting and promoting ancestral health knowledge, we don't just honor the wisdom of our elders, we're also creating opportunities for youth to improve public health and also strengthen cultural identity across Belize, Guatemala, and the wider region. I'd like to extend a huge thank you to all of our listeners that are tuning in from Belize, Guatemala, or from beyond for exploring this meaningful topic with us. And if you are a traditional healer and you would like to share our knowledge with us, please contact us so that we can have another episode about traditional healing, which would be a great part of also preserving this knowledge. We hope that today's episode has helped you reflect on the healing power of tradition and the importance of cultural respect in public health. This has been La Zona de Zone podcast by the Organization of American States Office in the Adjacency Zone in Belize and Guatemala with the support of the government of Spain. Until next time, keep listening and keep learning.